Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. We are going to be carrying on with April's exceptional story, Totentanz. We've made our way to Vale Garden and we are going to be going to the Parlour of Virtue to try and find the steps to the dance. I think it was one of the things. Yes, finding the steps. Two claymen flank the doors of the Parlour of Virtue, with relaxed and open postures that somehow promise enormous violence. They look you up and down as you approach and politely suggest that you grace some other establishment with your presence. So we can either talk our way in. You are on a mission for the good of London. Surely they will see reason. I can sneak my way in. You spot an open window, lace curtains billowing, nearly as enticing as the parlour itself. Or we could drop the name, Sinning Jenny. Surely an instructor of Sinning Jenny's finishing school, and what's more, a good friend of the parlour itself, could seek entry without being accosted. I do not have this. I have no idea what this is, but colour me intrigued. I want to know how that happens. I wonder if that's another exceptional story. But let's talk our way in. You lavish the bouncers with impeccable arguments, gilding shabby fact with gorgeous flattery, and alloying base truth with precious implication, spangling it all with rhetorical flourishes that scintillate like diamonds, until at last they are drawn inexorably to the correct conclusion, your prompt entry into the parlour. The rightmost bouncer scratches his jaw, stone-chipped fingernail rasping against clay skin. "Uh-huh," he says. "I suppose, if you're on a mission." That went surprisingly well. You round a corner and find Sinning Jenny leading a red-faced young man by the hand. Her flirtatious smile narrows. "An unexpected guest," she says. "A rare occurrence here, especially when this suite is already reserved. Is there something I could do to help you before you see yourself out?" The young man's blush deepens into an exquisite vermilion. "So we can quickly explain your search for the seasoned hostess. You're here on business, but not that kind of business. Sinning Jenny will hopefully understand. And if we had the finishing school as well, we could ask help because of that, but we do not, so we're going to have to quickly explain." Warmth returns to Sinning Jenny's smile. The seasoned hostess just left. She stopped by for tea and light conversation on the way to the cigar club. The one in Vale Garden. Will want to hurry. She usually goes there to fortify herself before a night on the town, and since her retirement those nights have become rather more frequent. You make your exit promptly, winding through the Vale Garden streets towards the genteel facade of the cigar club, wreathed in a fog of smoke. The seasoned hostess sounds like a woman on a mission, and testing the parlour's hospitality for an uninvited guest would be unwise. So, at the cigar club, table after table of jaundiced old men disagree with everything. The staff, the newspaper, each other, themselves, all of it veiled in the stinking haze of cigar smoke. Amidst the unfriendly faces, an urchin in an oversized smoking jacket is the only member present to acknowledge you, making brief eye contact and flashing a smile before turning back to his meal. Let's approach this urchin. He looks friendlier than the rest of the clientele and a lot more alert. Maybe he's seen her. Up close, you can see the table shake as the urchin kicks idly at the table leg. He's digging into a passable imitation of a steak. "Not much for smoke and drink," he says, "but they got a dinner I can't resist." He points with a meat-bearing fork at a nearby table. waiting to be cleared. It bears several empty glasses and remnants of what might have been a meat pie. That little number is hers, and as soon as she was done, said she was headed to the Medusa's Head next. Time to trek to Watchmaker's Hill then. The cigar-chomping members continue to ignore you as you leave. Watchmaker's Hill it is. Here we are at the Medusa's Head. As you arrive, you can discern that the usual merry disorder of the Medusa's Head has been replaced by a scene of utter desolation. Broken bottles, broken windows, broken noses. A sea of spilt beer. A barkeep with a split lip is furiously mopping between sprawled rows of unhappy, sobbing regulars. Let's approach the surly barkeep. Please stop bleeding all over my floors. He barks over to a particularly piteous tavern tough. I just mopped there. He spits into his mop bucket at the mention of the seasoned hostess. Oh, she's left. Passed through like a storm. The head was having a bit of a brawl, nothing out of the ordinary, and she took it as an invitation for total war. Started with the unruly irregulars and then worked her way up to the bouncers. An absolute terror. He runs his thumb over his split lip. She headed off in the direction of Mrs. Plenty's carnival. When she was done, I'd avoid heading that way for a while if I were you. Perhaps you can finally corner her there. The musical scream of the calliope, the chemical scent of the fried rubbery lumps, the hush that hangs over the house of mirrors like a funeral shroud. The carnival is in rare form, but your dim hopes of finding the seasoned hostess in the roaring crowd are dashed by a sudden exodus of screaming attendees from the great wheel of Beneath the Neath. If you want to find her, you're going to have to do more than push through the crowd. Let's keep an eye on the exit. We could stand on the baker's stand, it'll be easier to find her from above, but I think just watching the exit. She won't be able to leave without you spotting her. Head and shoulders above the crowd, with iron grey hair, a scar tracing the elegant curve of her jaw. Surely this is the seasoned hostess. As you recognise her, she locks eyes with you and picks her way to your vantage point. I was wondering who was following me, she says with a smile as sweet as toffee and sharp as a cleaver. Let's talk, but back in Vale Garden, where it's quieter. She takes your hand in hers. For your sake, you should either bring good intentions or a lot of friends. Luckily I have good intentions. Yes. A courtyard confrontation. It's a long walk before the ruckus chaos of the carnival gives way to the everyday disorder of London proper. The seasoned hostess ducks into a courtyard and settles onto a nearby bench. This'll do, she says, pulling out a cigar and a very large trimming knife. Her steady hand belaying her recent whirlwind tour of London's drinking establishments. Let's talk. Why do you insist on following me? Makes a girl anxious. Let's announce our intentions. You've come for the Totentanz, and she's the only one who knows the steps. The seasoned hostess secretes her knife and cigar into her jacket and folds her arms. The latent threat of violence evaporating. Not what I expected. Thought I was beyond surprising, she says. If it gets you out of my hair, I'll teach you here and now. Easy to learn, but I'm not doing you a favour showing you this. I know the steps for every dance this side of the Danube, and not one of them is as troublesome as the Totentanz. The seasoned hostess shrugs out of her jacket and corrects your posture with a series of firm pokes. You'll get the hang of it pretty quickly, I think, she says. I had to learn the tango from a deviless, and I'll do better by you than she did me, at least. Your pose corrected, she grips your arms and begins walking you through the steps. I suppose, she says, after a long moment of quiet, if you have any questions about the Totentanz, I could answer them. How did she come to learn it? It's not the sort of thing one picks up in finishing school. An old lover of mine, a scholar addicted to moonlight. I don't know if she dug up the steps in the Forgotten Quarter or found them upstairs, but they never did her very little good. Everyone knows a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, especially in London. I've seen up close what can happen to the mind. She spent some time in the Royal Bath, and then she vanished. The seasoned hostess is silent for an entire circuit around the courtyard. Something to think about for yourself. What is the Totentanz? She's the only one in the Neath who knows the steps after all. If you've never seen one before, a rifle just looks like a funny tube, or an engine just looks like an odd metal thing of cogs and pipes, she says. I think the Totentanz is the same. We call it a dance because that's what it looks like, but I think it's for something. I've always made my clients remember things, a moment in their childhood, a lover who jilted them, a child they haven't seen in years. You're speaking softly now, lost in thought. Sometimes it reminds you of things you're better off forgetting. And we have it now. You could probably complete a full circuit around the courtyard without even a mild correction from the hostess. The Totentanz comes to you suddenly and pleasingly, like a word on the tip of your tongue, finally springing to mind. The seasoned hostess notices and lets you take the lead. Finally, she stops and gives you a deep bow. You have it well enough to be on your way, at least. I need a drink, and a cigar, and a fight. You have the steps. You have acquired the sheet music, found the instruments, and learned the steps of the Totentanz. You should return to the Withered Celebrant in the Forgotten Quarter. That we shall do. The creeping quiet of the Forgotten Quarter has been replaced by chaotic preparations for the Totentanz. Caterers carrying trays of canapes dart around, crate-hauling labourers as off-duty constables clear Soddo spiders and protesting rats out of nearby alleyways. Mr. Wines presides over the hubbub, its commands cutting through the noise like a cleaver through lace. The Withered Celebrant sits at the base of the pavilion steps in an oversized wingback chair, a plate of pastries on her lap. Mr. Wines' staff has been very kind to this old woman, she says, wryly. I hope you have returned with what we need. I can bring up the danger of the Totentanz. The Withered Celebrant did not warn you about the influence the Totentanz has over the people it comes near to. Does she not know? She does not seem especially concerned for herself. The Withered Celebrant chuckles, a sound like ash shaken in an urn. I told you that the Totentanz was so treasured because it brings true death. Even in the Neath, it cleaves through the is not to reveal what should be. Of course it isn't safe. She takes a trembling bite of the pastry. For someone as young as yourself, it might sicken the mind for a while, but as long as you only experience it in moderation, you will recover. It is only dangerous for an ancient thing like me, but that's why we're here, isn't it? Well, I guess we will hand over the parts for the Totentanz. You have all of the parts you were asked for. The time has come. The Withered Celebrant waves over one of Mr. Wines' assistants to take the instrument cases and attaché containing the sheet music. You've done well, she says, retrieving a cane from under her chair. There is plenty of time until the Totentanz begins. Walk with me. I would like to speak with you, away from all of this noise. You walk out into the dusty quiet of the Forgotten Quarter, far enough that the bustle of the pavilion is nearly inaudible. The Withered Celebrant lifts the veil from her face, revealing glacious eyes. I will not dissemble, she says. I do not want to die. I have long lost any fear of death. But the gift of the Totentanz, as precious as it is in the Neath, holds no appeal to me. I want you to sabotage it. Oh my god, this was not where I thought this was going. Let's probe her motivations. You might not be able to change her mind, but perhaps she'll help you understand. She laughs, long and dry. Are you familiar with death here? Some tomb-colonists are terrified of the far shore. Some can't abide the thought of emergence. What frightens me is loose ends. I am not yet finished with life. It is circumstance that has forced me into participating in this cursed Totentanz. The Withered Celebrant braces herself against her cane. I owe a debt to the priest king, who meddle in the affairs of the tomb colonies and all of the Neath. They are ancient, even compared to me, and powerful, perhaps even compared to a master. Participating in the Totentanz is the price they demanded of me. I have made a show of complying. She gazes at the distant lights of the pavilion. Until now, at least. So we can agree to sabotage the Totentanz. She doesn't want to die. It's not right to sacrifice her, even for the sake of all the other tomb colonists. Or we can refuse to sabotage the Totentanz. The Totentanz will grant the other tomb colonists true death. Their need for release should not be sacrificed just for her. This is a very strange choice. I don't know. It's the needs of the many, isn't it? Outweigh the needs of the few. Then I suppose if you are that few, your view tends to change. I'm going to refuse to sabotage the Totentanz. I will be able to change my mind later, but I don't want to sabotage it, I don't think. I understand, she says, the tremor of age strong in her voice. An obligation to a master is no small thing. The Withered Celebrant turns to walk back to the dilapidated pavilion. Remember that you do not need to make your decision until the dance begins. Time is the most precious of luxuries, and you have more than most. The preparations are complete. Mr. Wines and its staff have transformed the pavilion into an elegantly affected garden folly. A crowd of tomb colonists have already formed around the refreshments table, crowded by a bowl of indigo punch as large as a font. Clearly, this evening will be well lubricated. Mr. Wines stalks towards you across the dance floor, which has been ringed with filigreed lanterns, still shuttered, perhaps to be lit once the final dance begins.
Lovely work, it says. Only one task left. You must demonstrate the steps to our guests once the proceedings begin.
The master liberates an amuse-bouche from a tray of a passing waiter and sweeps away.
Please enjoy our hospitality in the meantime,
it says over its shoulder.
A little treat for a job well done, yes?
So we can head over to the punch bowl. Near it, Virginia is engaged in vigorous conversation with a waiter, while a tomb colonist, swathed in damask bandages, piles food high on his plate. Mr. Wines has piled the refreshments table high with a formidable spread. The eyes of Z-creatures nestled in delicate puff pastry, rubbery lumps suspended in aspic, thick slices of blood pudding, With no further information available as to whose, the indigo punch is going fast, but nobody has touched the glasses of absinthe arrayed in rows before it. Virginia, dressed in a fringed powder blue dress, has a waiter backed up against the wall. She's overseeing him spoon caviar into her vol au vent. He quivers as if his soul hangs in the balance. The tomb colonist, swathed in damask, catches sight of you over Virginia's shoulder and mimes a toast. Let's strike conversation with the tomb colonist. He was the first to acknowledge you. I could approach Virginia, but... Are you the one responsible for this? The tomb colonist says, with a thick third city accent. I must thank you. We must thank you. He gestures to the tomb colonists dispersed throughout the pavilion. They keep to themselves after the long journey, summoning the last of their reserves for the dance. But we will appreciate your efforts to be spared the far shore, to be released. We did not believe we would be so lucky. The tomb colonist pauses to gulp his punch, smacking his lips when he finishes. But don't let me go on too long. I'm just a sentimental old corpse. Let's approach Virginia. Perhaps you can find out why she was so interested in the music for this affair. That poor waiter would thank you for the distraction at any rate. Virginia turns to you. The waiter scurries off immediately. Wines does know how to hold an event, she says. It's certainly funded quite the spectacle at the auction house. I don't think anyone's given me a fight like that since my election. She takes a delicate bite from her precariously piled vol au vent. It hardly matters. The auction was a diversion. The sheet music, a passing fancy. A lark, an ephemeral whim. Keep the score with my blessing. I'm happy for you. Virginia gives you a magisterial nod and hunts down the waiter once more. Garçon, she says, I need you to mix me a drink. That poor bloody waiter. Let's return to the party proper and make our way to the edge of the dance floor. The Duchess graces the party with her presence. She is pointedly ignoring Mr. Wines, who has acquired a brimming wine goblet in the scant moments since you last saw him. Till the final dance, the band plays only prosaic tunes. They're providing a perfectly serviceable rendition of the Blue Danube, but nothing about their performance betrays the origin of their hard-won instruments. Not far from them, the Duchess has commandeered an entire tray of crayfish canapes to the delight of her tabby cat companion. Apparently oblivious to her, Mr. Wines is conducting the band with an invisible baton, sloshing wine onto its cloak with every gesture. The Withered Celebrant has installed herself in the shadowy outermost edges of the pavilion. She looks onto the revelry, very much not part of it. Let's sidle up to Mr. Wines. It's not very often one gets to attend a dance with a master.
If music be the food of love, play on, Mr. Wines intones. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting, that appetite may sicken and so die. The master finishes the line with a flourish, sending the last of its wine onto the floor. Just a little poetical effort, Mr. Wines says. An original on my part. We should have been Mr. Poems. What good is wine, really? Music intoxicates as sweetly and hardly ever spills. Servants scurry over to clean up. Mr. Wines returns to swaying as the music swells. We are excessively voluble. Please forgive us. Have a drink and put our rambling out of your mind. Mr. Wines seemed flustered, and we gained blackmail material. Wonderful. We can eavesdrop on the Duchess. The Duchess is a legendary host, but an exceedingly rare guest. Could have drawn her to the Totentanz of all the dances, balls and banquets in London. She's unlikely to tell you, however. A waiter, dropping a platter of solace fruit tarts on the pavilion's cobblestones, provides the perfect opportunity to get closer
unnoticed. The Duchess turns from the fruit-splattered scene to the tabby. "You must stop worrying about me. Have another crayfish and calm yourself." She lowers the canapé tray to the floor before whispering to the cat. "I know how to cope with the consequences. I have to see him again, as he was. I'm not waiting for another fall." The Duchess's tabby companion meets your eye and flicks its tail. Time to move on, and we shall talk to the Withered Celebrant. The Withered Celebrant's shadowy corner is far from the milling Tomb-colonists. Every once in a while, one will approach her, seeking conversation, a dance partner, but she sends each of them away, complaining of fatigue. "It is hard," she says, in a moment when you are alone. "It is hard," she says, in a moment when you are alone, "to hate something your comrades want so badly. I had higher hopes for us all than an end like this. However pretty it might be, I'm certain with enough time I would have found something better than this half measure that the priest kings and masters cooked up." Her eyes glitter through her veil. "I suppose I must resign myself to it, unless you reverse course." Well, let's return to the party proper. But I think before we prepare to teach the guests the Totentanz steps, this is where I shall end this episode. So thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. And as always, I'll see you next time.